For decades, whenever people talked about Africans living in the United States, Europe, or elsewhere abroad, one question seemed to dominate the conversation. How much money are they sending home? But Burkina Faso is beginning to ask a much bigger question. What if the diaspora did more than send money to relatives every month? What if they began building companies, creating jobs, transferring skills, and owning a larger share of the economy back home? That question is becoming increasingly important under Captain Ibrahim Traore. Look at what recently happened in Maryland in the United States. Entrepreneurs, investors, members of the Burkinabe diaspora, diplomats, and economic officials gathered around opportunities in agriculture, agro-industry, energy, healthcare, infrastructure, and services. They were not simply discussing donations. They were discussing business, investment, partnerships, and the possibility of connecting experience gained in America with opportunities developing inside Burkina Faso. And this changes the conversation completely. A Burkinabe living in America can send money home to support a family. That matters enormously. The same person can invest savings through a national bond and earn a return while helping finance development. But there is a third possibility that could have an even deeper long-term impact. That person could become an owner. They could invest in a processing company, create employment, introduce new management experience, connect local producers with international markets, and build something that continues producing value year after year. This is where the story becomes much larger than remittances. If you follow the transformation taking place across Burkina Faso and the wider Sahel, subscribe to the channel because we examine not only what is happening, but what it could mean for Africa's economic future. In this video, we will examine whether Burkina Faso is building a new relationship with its diaspora, why the Maryland meetings matter, where Ibrahim Traore fits into this strategy, and what could still go wrong. Because attracting patriotic money is one challenge. Convincing people to place their businesses, experience, savings, and part of their future inside Burkina Faso is something much bigger. To understand why this strategy matters, we first need to understand the enormous human and economic resource Burkina Faso has beyond its borders. According to figures presented by Burkina Faso's foreign minister before the National Assembly, the Burkinabe diaspora is estimated at more than 16 million people. That figure should be treated as an estimate rather than a precise census, but its scale tells us something important. A significant part of Burkina Faso's human potential lives outside the country. And these people are already connected to the economy back home. Official financial channels record more than 200 billion CFA francs in annual transfers from Burkinabe living abroad. That is roughly 350 million United States dollars. Depending on the exchange rate. Much of this money performs an essential role. It helps families buy food, pay school fees, cover medical expenses, repair homes, and survive difficult periods. But there is an important distinction between supporting consumption and financing production. Imagine a Burkinabe worker in Maryland sending $500 to relatives every month. That money can immediately improve their lives. There is nothing wrong with that. Remittances are often a lifeline. Now imagine that same worker, perhaps together with 20 other members of the diaspora, invest capital in a food processing business back home. The money could purchase machinery. The company could buy crops from local farmers. Workers could be hired. Drivers could transport products. Local businesses could supply packaging. Finished goods could be sold in Burkina Faso and perhaps eventually exported. The original investment would begin moving through several layers of the economy. That is the difference Burkina Faso appears increasingly interested in exploring. The diaspora is not simply a source of money arriving every month. It potentially represents capital, business knowledge, professional experience, international connections, and people who understand both Burkina Faso and markets thousands of miles away. And once you look at those 16 million people through that lens, the question changes. It is no longer only how much money they send home. The question becomes how much economic capacity they could help build there. The clearest evidence that Burkina Faso wants to turn private savings into development capital came in May 2026 when the government launched its new Diaspora Bond program. The overall program was designed to mobilize 240 billion CFA francs, worth roughly 420 million United States dollars. The first offering targeted 125 billion CFA francs, or approximately $219 million. And this was not simply a request for donations. Investors were offered two choices. One had a maturity of 5 years with an annual interest rate of 6.75%. The other ran for 7 years at 6.85%. The message was clear. You could support national development while also expecting a financial return. The first offering exceeded its target. By the time the results were announced, 151 billion CFA francs had been mobilized, approximately $264 million. However, an important distinction must be made. The offering was not restricted exclusively to the diaspora. Other investors were also allowed to participate, so it would be misleading to claim that the entire amount came from Burkinabe living abroad. Still, the result demonstrated that the government could mobilize substantial capital through this mechanism. The planned uses are equally important. The financing was connected to infrastructure, industrial development, agriculture, energy, social housing, roads, and other productive projects. But this is where the next stage begins. When someone buys a government bond, that person becomes an investor and effectively lends capital to the state under agreed terms. Owning a business is different. A business owner makes decisions about workers, equipment, suppliers, customers, production, and expansion. That owner can introduce knowledge, build relationships, and create economic activity that continues long after the original investment is made. So the diaspora bond may prove something important, but it does not prove everything. Burkina Faso has shown that it can ask people to invest in national development and attract significant capital. The harder question is whether that financial confidence can now be transformed into factories, farms, service companies, and businesses owned partly or entirely by the diaspora itself. This brings us to Maryland, where the next phase of this strategy becomes easier to see. At the first International Investors Forum connecting the United States and Burkina Faso, members of the diaspora met entrepreneurs, investors, diplomats, and institutions responsible for supporting business development. Agriculture, agro-industry, energy, healthcare, infrastructure, and services were among the opportunities presented. But the most important part was not the ceremony. It was the connection being created between people who have capital and experience abroad and people who understand how business actually works inside Burkina Faso. Imagine a Burkinabe entrepreneur who has spent 20 years building a career in the United States. Perhaps he has saved money and wants to invest $100,000 back home. Patriotism may give him the desire to act, but patriotism cannot answer the practical questions that immediately follow. What should he invest? How does he register a company? Who can become a reliable local partner? What financing is available? What permits are required? Where are the customers? And who can help when something goes wrong? This is why business-to-business meetings matter. They can shorten the distance between an idea and an actual investment. Instead of simply telling diaspora members to return home and invest, institutions can introduce them to businesses already operating on the ground, government services that understand the procedures, and entrepreneurs who can explain the realities that are rarely visible from thousands of miles away. There is also an important reason for caution. A successful investment forum is not the same thing as successful investment. At this stage, there is not enough reliable public information showing how many new companies, permanent jobs, or completed investments resulted directly from the Maryland event. That distinction matters. Maryland should therefore be viewed as evidence that a bridge is being built, not proof that everyone has already crossed it. And if Burkina Faso wants that bridge to carry serious capital for decades, meetings and patriotic speeches will not be enough. Diaspora investors will need information, trustworthy partners, workable institutions, and opportunities capable of producing real returns. That is when enthusiasm becomes business. Agriculture may be one of the clearest places to understand what diaspora entrepreneurship could actually mean for Burkina Faso. Consider what happens to a crop after a farmer harvests it. The farmer may grow tomatoes, onions, mangoes, corn, or another agricultural product. But producing the crop is only the beginning of the economic chain. Someone must store it. Someone may need to process it. Someone must package it, transport it, distribute it, and eventually sell it to consumers. At every stage, additional value can be created. If a farmer sells raw tomatoes immediately after harvest, much of the potential value ends there. But if a local company turns those tomatoes into a packaged product that can remain on store shelves longer, the country creates another layer of economic activity that requires equipment, electricity, workers, packaging, transportation, management, and access to markets. This is where diaspora investors could become important. A Burkinabe entrepreneur living in the United States does not necessarily need to return home and purchase thousands of acres of farmland. He could invest in the missing link between the farmer and the consumer. Perhaps that means a storage facility that reduces losses after harvest. Perhaps it means processing equipment. It could mean refrigerated transportation, packaging, distribution, or a company capable of helping local products meet standards required by larger markets. One investment can therefore support many people who never directly work for the investor. Farmers gain another buyer, workers gain employment, transport companies gain customers, local suppliers gain business. And if more of the processing happens inside Burkina Faso, more of the value created by the final product can remain inside the national economy. This is why agro-industry matters so much in the wider discussion about economic sovereignty. Producing more raw material is important, but processing more of what Burkina Faso already produces can be even more transformative, and diaspora entrepreneurs may bring something especially useful to that effort. They can combine capital and international business experience with the knowledge of local farmers and entrepreneurs. If that connection works, the diaspora is no longer simply financing consumption from abroad. It is helping build the value chain at home. Money, however, may not be the most valuable thing the Burkinabe diaspora can bring home. Consider what happens when someone spends 20 or 30 years building a career in the United States. During that time, he may learn how companies manage inventory, maintain equipment, control quality, organize accounting, train workers, serve customers, negotiate contracts, and deliver products on schedule. Those lessons have economic value. A Burkinabe engineer working in America may understand modern production systems. A healthcare professional may know procedures that improve efficiency in a clinic. A logistics manager may understand how to reduce transportation costs. An entrepreneur may know how to build a brand, manage employees, or reach customers outside Africa. Burkina Faso does not necessarily need every one of these people to permanently leave the United States and move home. There is another possibility. A businessman living in Maryland could invest in a company in Burkina Faso while continuing his career in America. He could visit several times a year, train a local management team, introduce better operating methods, connect the company with suppliers abroad, and help its products reach international customers. That creates circulation of knowledge rather than requiring a permanent return of every skilled person. And this may be one of the greatest opportunities hidden inside the diaspora. But there is also a warning. Experience gained in the United States cannot simply be copied and placed into Burkina Faso without adjustment. The cost of electricity may be different. Consumer incomes are different. Infrastructure is different. Regulations, transportation, financing, and local business culture may also be different. The strongest model, therefore, may not be diaspora experience replacing local knowledge. It may be diaspora experience working together with local knowledge. The person abroad understands international systems and markets. The entrepreneur at home understands customers, suppliers, communities, and the realities on the ground. Bring those two forms of knowledge together, and something more valuable than a monthly transfer can emerge. Capital can build equipment, but experience can help that equipment become a sustainable business. And that distinction brings us directly to Ibrahim Traore, because his political message increasingly connects national sovereignty not only with money, but with production, skills, ownership, and the ability of Burkinabe people to build for themselves. This is where Ibrahim Traore becomes important to the story, but his role needs to be understood carefully. Traore did not invent the Burkinabe diaspora, private entrepreneurship, or the desire of people abroad to invest at home. What he has done is place economic sovereignty, local production, and greater Burkinabe ownership near the center of his political message. When launching Burkina Faso's Community Entrepreneurship Initiative, Traore argued that the country's future would not simply come from somewhere else. Citizens inside Burkina Faso and those living abroad were encouraged to participate in building enterprises through popular shareholding. The objective went beyond raising money. The broader message was to produce, process, create jobs, consume more locally produced goods, and eventually increase exports. Diaspora entrepreneurs have also been brought directly into this conversation. In 2024, Traore received representatives of a forum for Burkinabe entrepreneurs living abroad. Their discussions concerned investment opportunities and patriotism, but something else was equally revealing. Diaspora entrepreneurs raised practical difficulties, including slow administrative procedures. That detail matters because it exposes the difference between political inspiration and economic execution. Traore can send a powerful signal that diaspora investors are wanted. He can encourage Burkinabe abroad to look again at opportunities in their homeland. His government can make local ownership and industrialization national priorities. But he cannot personally register every company, guarantee every contract, manage every investment agency, or make every business profitable. That work depends on ministries, banks, investment agencies, embassies, local authorities, entrepreneurs, and the quality of public administration. So, Traore's role can be understood in several ways. He is a political signal, a mobilizer, an agenda setter, and for many supporters, a symbol of a more self-reliant Burkina Faso. But symbols eventually face measurable tests. If political confidence encourages someone in Maryland to consider investing back home, that is only the beginning. The real test comes when that person tries to open a company, hire workers, obtain permits, move goods, protect an investment, and earn a sustainable return. A leader can make the diaspora look toward home. Only functioning institutions can convince them to build their future there. But this strategy will not succeed simply because the diaspora loves Burkina Faso or believes in Ibrahim Traore. Investment eventually confronts reality. Imagine again that Burkinabe entrepreneur in Maryland. This time he is prepared to invest $100,000 in a company back home. Before transferring the money, he will probably begin asking the same questions any serious investor would ask. Is the area secure? Is electricity reliable enough to operate equipment? Can trucks move goods consistently? How long will permits take? Can contracts be enforced? Can he find trustworthy partners and trained workers? And if something goes wrong, will his investment be protected? These questions cannot be answered by patriotism alone. Security remains one of Burkina Faso's most serious challenges. International assessments continue to identify insecurity as a major risk to economic activity and investment. A processing plant cannot operate normally if suppliers cannot reach it. A transportation company cannot prosper if important routes become unreliable. There are institutional challenges as well. Burkinabe diaspora entrepreneurs themselves have raised concerns about administrative delays. The government has been pursuing reforms and greater digitalization, but announcing a reform and making it work consistently are two different things. This leads to perhaps the most important warning in this entire story. Money raised does not equal successful businesses. Burkina Faso mobilizing 151 billion CFA francs through the first diaspora bond offering, approximately $264 million, is an important financial achievement. But raising capital is only the first stage. The deeper test comes afterward. How many projects are completed? How many businesses remain operational after several years? How many permanent jobs are created? How much additional production appears? And will investors be satisfied enough to invest again? Those measurements will tell us far more than speeches or ceremonies. This does not mean Burkina Faso's strategy is failing. It means the most difficult phase is beginning. Political confidence can encourage people to move their savings. But if Burkina Faso wants diaspora families to place businesses, property, professional reputations, and decades of accumulated wealth into the country, it must turn that confidence into institutional trust. That is the difference between raising money once and building an investment ecosystem that can survive for generations. There is another side of this story that deserves careful attention. How should we understand the criticism coming from Western governments and international institutions? It would be easy to reduce everything to a simple claim that the West opposes Ibrahim Traore because Burkina Faso wants greater economic independence. But the available evidence does not support such a sweeping conclusion. Western governments and international organizations have raised serious concerns about Burkina Faso's military-led political transition, security conditions, political freedoms, governance, investor protection, and the growing role of the state in parts of the economy. Some of those criticisms are political. Others are questions that any diaspora investor should also consider. If you are putting your retirement savings into a business, you want contracts to be respected. You want predictable rules. You want roads to remain open, public administration to function, and your property to be protected. Those concerns should not simply be dismissed because they come from outside Africa. At the same time, another fact complicates the popular narrative. Burkina Faso has not isolated itself from international finance. It continues to work with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other external partners, while simultaneously trying to mobilize more domestic and diaspora capital. That suggests self-reliance does not have to mean isolation. It can mean building enough internal financial strength that a country has more choices about where its development money comes from and how it is used. And this may contain the most useful lesson for other African countries. Do not simply copy Ibrahim Traore or copy Burkina Faso. Build institutions that give the diaspora several ways to participate. Some people will continue sending money to relatives. Others may purchase bonds. Some may buy shares. Entrepreneurs may build companies. Professionals may transfer knowledge. Business owners abroad may connect African producers with international customers. But none of this can survive on patriotism alone. Patriotism may persuade an investor to make the first investment. Transparent rules, reliable institutions, security, and real returns will determine whether that investor makes the second. For Africa, that distinction could determine whether diaspora engagement remains mostly about sending money home or evolves into something much larger. Africans around the world helping own and build productive economies on the continent. So let us return to the question we started with. What happens when the African diaspora does more than send money home? Burkina Faso may be giving us an early glimpse of the answer. Remittances can support families. Bonds can mobilize savings for national projects. But business ownership can go further. It can create jobs, transfer knowledge, strengthen local suppliers, process African resources at home, and connect African companies with customers around the world. That is the larger opportunity. But Burkina Faso has not yet proven that this entire model will succeed. The real evidence will come over the years ahead. How many diaspora businesses are actually created? How many survive? How many workers do they employ? How much local production do they generate? Do investors receive the returns they expected? And after the first investment, are they confident enough to invest again? Those questions matter more than applause. Ibrahim Traore may be the political symbol encouraging many people to look differently at Burkina Faso. But sustainable economic development must eventually become stronger than any individual leader. Institutions, entrepreneurs, workers, and citizens must carry it forward. That lesson matters for Mali and Niger under Assimi Goïta and Abdourahmane Tiani. It matters across West Africa and the wider Sahel. It also matters to the African Union and to anyone following Africa news, because the future debate about Africa may not simply concern aid, debt, France, or foreign investment. Africa's greatest untapped resource may not only be gold beneath the ground or oil beneath the soil. Part of it may be living in Maryland, New York, Paris, London, and cities around the world, carrying savings, professional skills, business experience, and international networks. The challenge is creating a system worthy of that investment. If you are part of the African diaspora, tell us what would give you enough confidence to build a business in your country of origin. Your answer may reveal more about Africa's economic future than any political speech. And if you want to continue examining how Burkina Faso and the Sahel are changing, follow this channel and join us for the next story. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. Every video on this channel is carefully researched, thoughtfully written, and meticulously edited by our dedicated team. We don't rely on automated production or shortcuts to create our content. Every story, every visual, and every detail is crafted with genuine care, passion, and a commitment to bringing you meaningful, high-quality videos.